Today, a memorial service was held in Concord, California, marking 80 years since one of the largest military disasters of World War II. This year's event comes just days after the exoneration of more than 200 black sailors punished after the incident. In attendance at today's service, family members who've demanded a hard look at the military's complicated record on race. CBS's Elizabeth Cook has more.
In Concord, California, a city about 30 miles from San Francisco, are the remains of a pier. It was here in 1944 where disaster struck.
The explosion of 2 munition ships in San Francisco Bay shocks the world.
It was so devastating. It actually knocked him off his bunk.
Daryl Meek's father, Freddie, had just returned to the barracks. So too had Cyril Shepard. Carol Cherry is his daughter.
So he was reading a letter from home when the explosions happened.
The blast killed 320 people and injured 400 others and heavily damaged the town of Port Chicago. Most of the dead, young black sailors who loaded ordnance onto ships.
They received very little training.
Segregation meant they were barred from seafaring jobs, but they could load munitions.
He talked about these big bombs you can't get your arms around, and he says, and these guys weren't trained. He says, all you can hear is bam, bam.
After the blast, surviving white officers were sent on leave to recover. Black sailors were ordered back to work, including picking up human remains.
It had to be traumatic. It had to be traumatic.
258 sailors refused to go back to work, citing safety concerns. After warnings and threats from senior officers, most complied, but 50 men held out.
The 50, they stood together and they said, kill us, but we're not going to continue to work under these conditions.
The sailors, including Meeks and Shepard, were convicted of mutiny, sentenced to hard labor along with dishonorable discharges. It took until this week for the Navy to clear their names.
Here's a letter from Secretary today.
All the sailors exonerated. Their convictions ruled unjust.
The findings of guilty in the sentence are set aside.
This exoneration was a long time coming.
But 80 years later, none of the Port Chicago 50 were alive to see it.
They deserve to be in our history books, and I'm not speaking just of black history, but they deserve to be in American history books.
He's our hero because he stood with those 50, those other 49 sailors. They stood for what was right.
Justice at last. Elizabeth Cook, CBS News, Concord, California.